Welcome to Night Shadows. I'm Stuart Best. Where the paranormal is normal. Where that which you thought you knew, you didn't. And where the future can be known, if you know exactly where to look.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks for tuning in and listening. This is kind of a special report. There's a lot going on in the Middle East unreported. We're on the brink of war, if not already in war, and nothing is being reported basically on mainstream media. And we have the takedown of the United States occurring right under our faces. And before we get started, hi, Larry, are you online with us?
Yeah, I'm here, Stuart.
Oh, good. I want to read something we got in, I guess you could call it an email. And I want you to comment on it, too. And they said they got, I'm not going to name who they are, but finished listening to your latest broadcast, and her husband evidently brought up an interesting question. Seeing that Scripture doesn't clearly indicate how Babylon's destruction occurs, it seems to be more logical that the destruction would be due to an internal civil war, which we can certainly see brewing, rather than from an overt military attack from Russia or China. The U.S. would be so deeply involved in the internal chaos management and protecting the homeland from any overt attack during that time that they would likely be extremely reluctant to be involved in any military operations in the Middle East. And that would account for the U.S. being missing when Gog attacks Israel. So, they asked the question, why aren't we considering the Babylon if it's the U.S.? Well, there's no if about whether Babylon is the United States. I want to make that very clear. And I'm not trying to brag or say I'm right. This is what the Lord says clearly. Babylon, modern Babylon, is the United States. And there's no ifs, ands, ors, or buts, and I don't care who wants to say it isn't. All you have to do is read the parameters, and a parameter is a descriptive phrase. There are over 140 of them. The United States of America is the only nation it even comes remotely close to fulfilling those, and it fulfills all of them. If you want to know who Babylon is, go to Angel Fall 923, and we've got it up. Why America is Babylon. Prove it wrong, and I know you can't. Anyway, it is Babylon the Great. But anyway, to get to the question, what do you think? Okay, here's my first point. The Lord of hosts has sworn by himself, saying, surely I will fill thee with men as with caterpillars, and they shall lift up a shout against thee. Well, Larry, how long have we been reporting border crossings, illegals entering into the United States? Years. What do you think?
Oh, my. We've been reporting that for a number of years, and people like Dan Gordon and others have written books warning about the borders. And, of course, today in America, we're having reports, videos of armed mercenary troops, it appears, crossing into America from the south, crossing our southern border. And Trump's been in almost 2 years, Stuart, and still cannot secure the border. They won't let him.
Yep, we've got what we have had happen, folks, here in the United States. It was infiltrated by the communists, and what you're watching is a communist coup. And what they do is they come in, they infiltrate, then they destabilize a nation, and we're going to see some of this, I think, very quickly. I think they've made up their mind if they don't do it now, they're not going to be able to do it. And so within the next 3-4 weeks, we should, hopefully we don't. Hopefully we got years yet to go. I just don't believe that that's probably the case. But I'll read it to you again. The Lord of hosts has sworn by himself, surely I will fill thee with men as with caterpillars, and they shall lift up a shout against thee. That's a fifth column military operation to come into the country, take up residence, and when the call is given, the guns come out, the mischief begins. This is where we are. You can't blame Obama for the borders. You can't not blame Clinton for the borders. You can't blame the Bushes for the border. You want somebody to blame the American people, and blame God. God is the one, the Lord of hosts, has said, I'm going to fill you up with fifth column military operations, and they're going to come in, and they're going to destroy you from within, first of all. This is a typical operation. You fill a nation if you can do it, and evidently we're just not smart enough to stop something like this or even believe it. I mean, if you go down to your neighbor and tell them, well, there's a fifth column operation in this country. They're military. They're enemies of ours. They just roll their eyes at you, laugh at you, and probably wouldn't want much to do with you. And that's what we're dealing here. We're dealing with outright, I guess, naivety or some form of total apathy. And when you have that kind of thing going, you can't stop it. So it's the Lord himself that's actually doing this. He does it through our leaders, though. He just has them do what he wants them to do, which is, as Larry just said, leave the borders wide open. Trump's been in office for 2 full years. It's worse now than it ever was. And now we have wide open, in-your-face videotape of fifth column military operations coming into our country. I didn't see much about that. Did you see any hue and cry, Larry, on that? I didn't see anything on it.
No, other than it was on what they call conservative Patriot News reports, which they hate and are getting rid of, by the way, daily. It was simply, the American, if you like to, I know you like to call it the Communist News Network, but the communist mainstream media are simply not covering it all. It's just not there.
Yeah, and they don't want it covered because they don't want to arouse the American people. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Book of Isaiah talks about this, that mischief will come into the cities, and it's from these people. We are now thoroughly, all across this nation, been infiltrated with fifth column. They may be not too far away from you. You wouldn't even know it, but you will when this thing begins to go down. Okay, number 2. So anyway, he fills our country with fifth column. And what that does, it weakens the nation. When they rise up, this weakens and confuses the people within America. Total chaos. They don't know what to do because they've been dumbed down to the point where they couldn't believe it, even if it was happening right to their doorstep. Oh, what's this? What's happening? Well, this is what happens when a nation forgets God, when a nation rules God out of our school system, when a nation becomes no longer a Christian nation, but essentially, as Barack Obama did say, we are no longer a Christian nation. That's one of the times he is actually telling you the truth. We're not a Christian nation anymore. In fact, the Christians themselves are so apostate and disobedient to the Lord that you almost have to count them as non-Christians, unbelievers. Okay, number 2, lest your heart faint, and ye fear for the rumor that shall be heard in the land. A rumor shall both come 1 year, and after that, in another year, shall come a rumor, and violence in the land, ruler against ruler. Now, there have been a number of things that took place, rumors that went throughout the land first in 1 year and then again in another year. Y2K was one of those. We don't really know what this rumor is or was, but do we have ruler against ruler? What do you think, Larry? Is that a fair assumption we can say now?
Oh, I think without a doubt. Mainstream media may not really tell much truth, but they are certainly making examples out there of ruler against ruler operations going on daily in America, absolutely captivating the American mindset. And this coming week, we've really got to be cautious because I think ruler against rulers maybe will step out of the closet a little more.
Yeah, we'll get into that. That seems kind of ominous, actually, with what's going on with George Soros and importing people into the cities to do his bidding. Anyway, after the ruler against ruler, this is what it says. Therefore, behold, the days come that I will do judgment upon the graven image of Babylon. Her whole land shall be confounded, and all her slain shall fall in the midst of her. Folks, we're about to get it from the Lord himself. You cannot accept the promises and I shouldn't say promises, but the blessings of the Lord, and then turn your back on the Lord without inheriting all of the curses of the Lord. If you want to know what the blessings are, go to Deuteronomy chapter 28. Applies to any nation in the world, especially to America. It also has all the curses that God says he's going to bring upon a nation that forgets God. Go into Isaiah chapter 17 and you'll find something very, very interesting because against Israel, which I think Larry and I are going to report on tonight, but Isaiah 17 cannot be far off. And why does that happen to Israel? Because they forgot God. You can't hit Israel between the eyes because they forgot God and not hit America between the eyes because they did the same thing. We're almost parallels in that. Anyway, for lo, I will rise up and cause to come up against Babylon an assembly of great nations from the north country, and they shall set themselves in array against her, and from thence she shall be taken. Their arrows, missiles, shall be as a mighty expert man. None shall return in vain. What do we got over across the North Pole? We have an assembly of great nations that surround Russia. The Soviet Union, as far as I'm concerned, is still intact, and all of this breakup is just so much garbage for people to believe. If you go in and read and watch what Russia does with her military exercises, she does them with all those so-called former parts of the Soviet Union. It was all stage play. Gorbachev, Stead, Glasnost, and whatever the other one was, I can't remember. That was all for show. It was all to lull the West into sleep so that they wouldn't figure out in time what they were doing behind the scenes. You ever wonder how come Russia has all of these really, really high-tech weapons? Where did they all come from? Well, because they've been working on them for years. So anyway, I will call to rise up an assembly of nations. And their arrows, missiles, shall be as mighty expert men. None shall return in vain. If you've done any research at all, you have probably heard and read about Russia refining her missile telemetry systems so that they can hit basically any target they put in there, probably within a square yard or two. none will return in vain. They're all going to hit their mark. They're going to hit their mark exactly as a bowman, expert bowman, would hit his target. What do you think, Larry? I mean, when you read the headlines, isn't that where we're going?
Well, it certainly seems like that's where we're going, Stuart, and we must not ever forget. You remember the original plan the Russians had, where they sent in embedded Spetsnaz and also suitcase nukes that they brought into this country. And it's almost like Americans forgot about those, but what do you want to bet? They're still there, waiting. Oh,
absolutely. They're still here. And we have Spetsnaz troops in here, whether anybody wants to believe it or not. I personally saw a whole group of them. They were eating in a restaurant. Clearly military, clearly Spetsnaz troops. They are here. Their suitcase nukes are here. They have infiltrated, and when the call comes, which may be any time now, we're going into total chaos and total bedlam. Hopefully it's not this year. Hopefully it's next year or the year after or maybe the year after that. I don't think so myself. I think there's something coming. And always remember, which is number 4 here on the list, Psalm 2. Nobody wants to pay any attention to Psalm 2. It's been redacted. Why do the heathen rage and the people imagine a vain thing? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, let us break their bands asunder, cast away their cords from us. He that sitteth in the heavens shall laugh, the Lord shall have them in derision. Then he shall speak to them in his wrath and vex them in his sore displeasure. We are on the verge of the final apex of the Psalm 2 war. Don't ever forget that the ultimate goal of all of this that we're all seeing is to get rid of Jesus Christ. Now, Larry, you said there was a vision somebody had, and he pointed his finger and said something about they're not after me so much as they are after you. Can you repeat that? Do you remember that?
I don't have it right in front of me at the moment, but I can kind of paraphrase it if you wish.
Yes.
Well, that was one, it was on Z3 News, actually, and someone had the vision. I think it was somebody named Xavier, but anyway, he said the Lord, President Trump pointed his finger at him and said, I'm not the one they're after. He was talking about the attacks on Trump lately to remove him and take him out. He said they're after, every Bible-believing Christian that's out there. In other words, you are who he's after, the enemy's after. You are who they're after. And he's talking about the so-called communist coup that's in operation. They're out there to take over and change this nation for good. And apparently, the American people that are patriotic or Christian or Jewish or whatever won't have a place in it because they won't be taking up space anymore.
Yeah, yep. And this is what it says. Take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed. Well, there you go, folks. Believe the Bible. It's telling you in plain English, actually, if you read even the modern ones, which I don't really cotton to because they've changed a lot of the wording. But if you go into the King James or the early 1611 Bible, it tells you basically what's going on. And we are in the middle of a communist coup. And that takes us to what's going on in Washington, D.C. Because I don't know what you think, Larry, but I think we are watching the final takedown of the United States. Let me read a couple of headlines here. Yet another witness denies Ford, the lady that brought these charges against Kavanaugh. They've got 4 affidavits now, signed, I guess, under oath, saying that she's baloney. She made it all up. No one backs up her story, ? This is all from Dershowitz. The demands made are outrageous. Supreme fight, Royals already ugly political climate. Incredibly frustrated. Dems. We already know he's guilty. There's your no trial. No more innocent until proven guilty. Now, these are your leaders, folks, that were voted into office. These are communist agents. I don't understand the American people. I really don't. I say that on Memorial Day, and it really riles people up, but I'm not here to please or tickle ears. Why do you send your sons and daughters off to war to get their arms blown off, their legs blown off, or killed, come back totally maimed in the name of fighting for freedom, when the American people who send these sons and daughters off to war, husbands and wives off to war, will not stand up against a communist coup that is now taking place in the United States? I don't understand that. I don't understand the hypocrisy of it. These are your own sons and daughters being sent off to war, your husbands, your wives, to maintain, we say, freedom. The only freedom you've got if the Constitution remains in full force and effect. They've stolen it from us. We don't have a Constitution anymore. And yet the American people say nothing. They're just sitting back and watching the stage play, Psalm 2 stage play. It's all a play. You're being played like a fiddle. I don't understand why people can't figure it out. But I guess maybe the Lord's behind it. He says, I'll pick your delusions. Why does he pick delusions for people? Because they're disobedient. Because they won't do what Jesus Christ commanded them to do. They claim they're Christians. They say they stand on every word of the Bible says, and yet they've redacted 90% of it, and they twist whatever's left to suit their fancy, just like the Bible prophet said. How was that worded, Larry? I think it said, having itching ears, they turn away from the truth and are turned unto fables. I think that's where we're at. What say you?
Yeah, it's very, very interesting, Stuart. Where we are, I remember, as you were talking, I recalled how Barry Rothman ran a Torah code at one time. And he actually detected in the Torah, hidden, embedded in the Torah, something called the alien stupid virus. In other words, the alien stupidity virus that would overtake mankind. And then on the other hand, at the same time, I wanted to insert in there and get your opinion, of course, too, is I sent you a message from Jonathan Gray from New Zealand.
Yes.
But he's not, and you know, Jonathan was in the U.S. for a while and then was run out of the U.S. after the Magic Mirror incident, revelation, and then he went to the Bahamas and he had to leave there and go to New Zealand. But he, uncharacteristic, as you know, not like him at all, he sent one out warning, and you've got a copy of it, of the coming Holocaust that's about to occur in Israel and another one in America brought on by the globalist plan.
Yep. This thing that's going on in Washington right now is all part of the globalist plan. This is all part to destroy the Congress. I think they've already done it. I have a problem with what's going on. I'll get into it. But anyway, here's something from, I can't think of his name right now. He's on Fox News. Anyway, this is what he said. Thursday is a significant date in this story. He's talking about the testimony of this woman, who's obviously a fake and a fraud. Because of the Senate rules, which are complex, if Ford testifies next Thursday, the vote on Kavanaugh will be pushed back at least another week. In this environment, that very well means forever. His nomination will be over. So will any Trump nomination to the court. there is a time before the midterms for the White House to introduce and vet a new candidate. Democrats will have prevented the president from fulfilling his vacancy. We'll have just 8 justices for the foreseeable future, and probably until there is another Democratic president. You may have voted for Trump in hope that he would put reasonable people on the Supreme Court, but tough. This is why they've done it. I believe they're all in it together. I believe Psalm 2, because it includes our rulers, not just those on top, but our rulers. They're all in this together. This is all a stage play. You're being played like a fiddle. What they're doing overseas has a lot to do with what's going on over here. As Larry just reported, Jonathan Gray, Israel's going into a Holocaust. America's going to go into a Holocaust at the same time. We're very close together. Anyway, there's another woman, according to Drudge. The latest thing I got out of Drudge, Ronan Farrow and Jane Mayer set to break report on Kavanaugh, another woman. They are not going to give up on this.
No, and Stuart, this reminds me so much of what they pulled on Kavanaugh, the Clarence Thomas approach that they were doing to him. You know, they, like he said, they lynched him in the public square, and they're doing the same thing with Thomas, and they're also using the Herman Cain situation like they've always done, is they bring these women, whether it's true, whether it's not, it doesn't matter to the left. They bring the accusations, and remember what lately they've been saying, and Dershowitz warned about? He said they're applying the guilty to them without a trial.
Yeah, they're setting a stage for that, which is what all dictatorships do. Unless you can prove your innocence, which they never let you bring forth the evidence you have. They just say, well, that's not admissible, and so off to the gulag you go. These people are murderers. Satan is a murderer and a liar from the very beginning. That ought to tell you who Washington is and who controls Washington, D.C. They're all a bunch of liars. The truth lies in the streets. You have to step back from all that's going on to understand what's really happening here. This is the final phase of destabilization of the United States. Bring in the chaos. We'll get into that because Larry's got some word on the George Soros busing people everywhere to bring in their little, I guess you could call it chaos. If you remember, what was it, Charlottesville? They were nasty people that they bust in there. And so this is going to get worse. Now, this New York senator, evidently, that's behind some of this, Kirsten Gillibrand, is leading the charge against Supreme Court nominee Judge Brett Kavanaugh. Kavanaugh has a 36-year-old sexual abuse charge hurled at him last week. She said he's guilty because he won't ask the FBI to investigate. Well, the FBI cannot investigate it. There's not a federal thing that the FBI can investigate, but that nobody pays any attention to that either. But anyway, evidently she's been involved in 2 other sexual rape charges that were proven total hoaxes. The one that's coming up is a total hoax. But you've got all the communist media, mainstream media, and they're all communists. They call themselves progressives now because they don't like the word communist. There's only a few of the talking heads that I've ever heard call this what it really is. It's a communist coup. They're in the final phase of destabilizing the United States. That's what this is all about. It was a Democrat. It was all a This is headline, Larry. It was all a Democrat plot. Christine Ford advisor told Democrats in July call about the plot to take down Kavanaugh. They even had the video or audio of it. In July, a conference call to Democrat leaders, Ricky Seidman, a Democratic operative, former Clinton White House official, current advisor to Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, laid out the strategy to defeat the nomination of Judge Brett Kavanaugh. This is a communist coup. That's all it is. And the reason I'm very, very suspicious, Larry, why did Grassley allow this woman to dictate when she's going to come and talk? Unless there's something else going on in the background, tied possibly to George Soros and his, I heard one figure, 800,000 or 900,000 people that they've got all planned to go into the streets. You're a detective. You've been in that business for years. It's almost like there's a connected dots here. Or am I just being a conspiratorial nutcase?
No, it's not hard to connect the dots at all, Stuart. And what's so interesting is the fact that it's both sides, Democrats and Republicans, that are against Kavanaugh and against the President of the United States, Donald Trump. And that's why, as they sit back and allow this to happen, that's why, you know, that's the picture. You don't have to make it up. It's already there. You can just look and see for yourself. And what's so interesting, too, this next week's going to be really interesting because there's a lot of warnings going off about Soros people being bust and moved. And these ain't good people. These are violent people that are coming into Washington, D.C. to, from what I've heard in some reports, indicate they're planning on turning Washington upside down and actually stop all business in Washington, D.C. and go after Trump. And at the same time, there's warnings that now as Trump is set to speak to all nations at the United Nations on Tuesday, there's also a bunch moving into the New York area and around the UN, and they're very, very concerned about trouble around the UN Tuesday and also New York. And this would be, I'll just mention, this would be an excellent time to have a false flag, too.
Yes, it would. Here's something from the ne'er-do-well, Sort Your Fall. You can figure out where she gets all her information from. Who knows where it comes from. A lot of times, though, it can be vetted and proven out. But this is something she says, and I think people really need to listen to it. Currently enveloping America is providing cover for 30 CIA-linked operatives attempting to enter the U.S. Congress during the upcoming 2018 midterm election, and who are now seeing coming to their aid George Soros-backed leftist radical mobs being rushed into Washington, D.C. by the thousands ahead of what is expected to be U.S. Senate circus event masquerading as a hearing that will determine Judge Kavanaugh's future this coming Thursday. Then she says 30 of these won their primaries, are now on the 2018 midterm ballots, and if elected, are preparing for a takeover of the entire U.S. intelligence community by their weaponizing against President Trump the Intelligence Authorization Act that the Democrats have now halted from being finalized. And that was Adam Schiff, who's obviously a communist, who did this. He derailed it. Okay, then it says former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe attempted to ignite a civil war in America by forcing President Trump to fire U.S. Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein with that fake report. With over 400,000 Soros-backed radical leftist terrorists are being prepared to flood into 900 U.S. cities to violently protest against, and whose actions are being coordinated by the radical socialist communist leader, Deborah Katz, the main attorney representing Judge Kavanaugh's accuser, Dr. Blasey Ford. So there you go. I guess you don't have to connect too many dots to figure out what we're dealing with here in the United States. We're dealing with the takedown of America. So watch next week. Larry's absolutely right. We are being set up. And you've got all the mainstream media, and I also include Fox News in that. I think they're just paid opposition. Many of them probably do not even realize what they're doing. But this is all to bring down the United States and get rid of her. They have to bring us down in order to merge the United States into the New World Order. And a long time ago they said that if we will not go willingly, they'll simply take us out. Read Ezekiel 38 and 39. That's the takedown of Israel, but it's also the takedown of the United States of America. That's when it happens. When you see the people going in, when you see Russian troops and her allies going into the mountains of Israel, we have very little time left here in America. And I got a feeling that this is going to go down much quicker than people think. What do you think, Larry? I just think this is moving much faster than we thought it might.
Well, something that's interesting, and you're aware of Dmitry Duduman, who he was. He
Yes.
actually warned against an attack on America. And I know you was talking about the infiltration of the fifth column, but
Yes.
when you look at that and you look at what Russia's and China's apparently preparing to do, all of that could happen in a short period of time, if they chose to do so. But Dmitry Duduman warned. But Dmitry Duduman also warned, if you'll remember, the Lord actually took him to Israel, and I know somebody that he visited with for a little while there, and they took Dmitry down to the Sea of Galilee, I believe it was, and an angel appeared to Dmitry, and he showed Dmitry, he said, this is where the invasion will come from, and he gave the route, and Stuart, you saw the pictures today of cargo planes from Russia lined up that were incoming, and Stuart, I'll tell you what, it looks like they're bringing everything with them, and it makes me wonder how much longer before they actually make a move towards the mountains of Israel.
Well, it's not going to be much longer, I think, and there's bad blood now with the shooting down of that 15 soldiers or whoever they were on that Russian airplane. Now Putin is blaming Israel. In fact, Israel sent a bunch of military leaders up to deal with Russia, and they had a meeting that lasted, according to what I read, about 20 minutes, and they were kicked out. Russia firmly believes, as does their military, that Israel deliberately and willfully got rid of that airplane to stage a provocation. Since then, the attitude between Israel and Putin has deteriorated down to about zero, but his attitude towards us has also deteriorated, because I think Putin knows now, and for sure by the end of next week or the week after, unless the Lord works an absolute miracle and pulls Trump out of all this, that Trump is not in control of the U.S. military. Somebody else is. Therefore, Putin has to prepare for war against the United States as well. And it appears that's exactly what he's doing. But isn't it odd that all this military equipment is going into Syria right now? And here's something else. I was watching a YouTube guy, and he points out something that a lot of these false flags really are exactly that. This Iranian false flag, he says, look at all the pictures of the wounded. You won't find one bit of blood anywhere. I think that's probably an indication that a lot of this was staged. And it goes right back to Psalm 2. They're staging all of this for World War III. Remember, Iran has to have a war, a huge war, in order for their 12th Imam to come up from his well and take over the world. Isn't that right, Larry? Am I missing that?
That's the plan. The Ammon is to come out of the hole in the ground or the cave or the well or whatever you want to call it. And there's been a number of people indicate they thought Obama might be that Ammon. Who knows? But at the same time, Stuart, this thing is building very, very quickly over there. And I find it odd, and would like your opinion on this. I find it really odd that now we're seeing really major trouble tracking in on Israel and the U.S. in the new time frame going into October.
Yeah. Folks, you ought to go get the movie Red October. There might be something more to that, but it's only the beginning of the movie that really is pertinent, where the commander of the Russian sub, who now has a silent running sub, which, by the way, they now have over there. In fact, I was reading an article about it, that the Soviets or the Russians have developed a silent running sub, and you can't, they even penetrated UK waters and they couldn't find them. They're that silent. Well, anyway, the commander says, we're going to just sit out here off the coast of America, and when call comes, basically, boom, we got them. It's a very, very interesting movie. Why is it called Red October? You had your vision of the missiles of October. October is a very, very special month, it seems. What do you think?
Yeah, I had the missiles of October vision years ago, and boy, oh boy, every October I've kind of held my breath to some degree. But what I find interesting too, Stuart, is a lot of the and we had somebody that has knowledge to know, a friend of mine, that the feast days and all was too early, and they actually come in October, and she verified your data on that, Stuart.
Oh, she did. Well, good. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, she contacted me and verified. She did a tremendous amount of research after you presented that information about everything being too early for the feast this year, and they actually fall in October. And when she looked at it, she said Stuart's right on what he's indicating. It does begin in October. The new year change and everything. Actually, from the ancient times, and that's what's interesting, Stuart, because it seems all of these troubles are beginning right about this time of October that you had warned about.
Yeah. I can't take credit for any of it. Scotty Clark is the one who actually, and he proves it through software, and I verified it myself because I have Stellarium, and he's absolutely right. And that's why today, actually, we are passing through the fall equinox, autumn. We're moving into autumn. Those are autumn feast days, actually. They're in the fall. So it's very, very interesting how all this may fit together. The Lord, I think, is using both Israeli calendars, ancient religious calendar. He's using their civil calendar, and he's using our calendars over here. And they're all going to merge somehow. He's the big mathematician. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to mention real quick. You remember the original Red Dawn movie that came out, and they've done a remake, but in the Red Dawn movies, and Dave Hodges with the Common Sense Radio Show recently posted some Red Dawn information which correlated with Red Elk's warnings, but the Red Dawn occurred in the fall.
That's right. Which makes total sense, particularly if the northern climes are going into a brutal cold winter. You've got Soviet Spetsnaz troops and Soviet troops, Chinese troops that have toughened up for bitter cold military operations. So this is going to get very, very interesting. And it may not be this year. It might be next year. I have no idea what the timing is. I can tell you this. There's a fellow who's a mathematician who has come up with something which is, I don't see how it could be, how do I say, I don't even know how to word it, but the accuracy of it is astounding. Let's put it that way. And he has come up with October, basically, this year, should see some massive changes that are going to change everything in American life that we've ever known. Now, he ties it in some ways to the taking of the bride of Christ, which is called sudden destruction in the Scriptures. And I think he's absolutely right that sudden destruction is the taking of the bride. The way it's worded, it has to be. But anyway, it's kind of interesting. I got a headline here, and this is confusing, and this makes me think of Psalm 2. I want your opinion on this one. The United States military will now be patrolling Syria with Turkish soldiers on their sides. Turkey seems to be playing both sides of the fence here. What do you think?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I saw that report, and we do know that American troops and Turkish troops are in the same vicinity of Syria right now, and that could possibly be. Erdogan seems to be playing both sides, and there does appear to be now a stalling, or if you will, a pause on the attack on Idlib. That's been put off, and the situation with Israel, between Russia and Israel, is taking up more time now. But one thing's interesting is not only is Russia bringing in massive amounts of military, also Iran is pouring stuff in through Iraq into Syria.
Yeah, it looks like they're ganging up and getting ready for Israel. I think this is all a ploy just to take out Israel. But we'll just have to watch and see how it happens. But here's one of the chief guys, Rouhani or whatever his name is, the leader of, he's the president of Iran. He says, President Donald Trump will fail in his confrontation with Iran, just like Iraq's Saddam Hussein. In other words, we're not going to kowtow to your demands that we quit our missile program. He says we are going to continue to build our missiles. This violates no international agreements. So, to just continuing, and by the way, this Russian, can you enlighten us onto this Russian thing that's isolating Israel as far as no-fly? And it sounded to me like Israel just said, we're going to go ahead and continue to attack Syria anytime we want. What's the latest?
Well, we are well aware that Russia had shut down the eastern Mediterranean to any air and sea traffic for their military exercise. Their military exercise, at Sartre sent out a map that showed a circle of defense around Syria. So the Russian exercise appears to be a defensive line circling Syria, even Syrian waters. And what has developed out of that, according to Depkopal and others, is that the Russians, if you will, and that includes everybody else, China, Iran, et cetera, they have really solidified the eastern side of the Mediterranean by Israel, and they're actually pushing Western forces back out to the Western Mediterranean. So this is what it looks like to me, Stuart. If you look at it on a map, the way they have encircled, it looks like they are literally encircling Israel for an attack. And I do know that Hal Turner's report that we couldn't verify the other day of Russian and Israeli planes, having a head-on, and then the Israelis moving back into Israel from Lebanon. We have verified that report now with Japanese media, and they're reporting that Russia not only now has planes in Lebanese airspace, they've also brought in more missiles and have given permission to the Syrians to fire on any Israeli planes over Lebanon. Now, what they brought in, Stuart, is also giving the Syrians, including the Iranians, Hezbollah, everybody else, it gives them the opportunity to actually fire on and bring down Israeli planes over Israel.
So, in other words, what they're really trying to do is ground the Israeli Air Force, the IDF Air Force. They're not going to pay attention to that. Here's a headline. It says, Lieberman strikes in Syria to continue despite downing of Russian plane. We do not intend to have a public argument with Russia, Defense Minister says, shortly before Moscow takes Israel to task over the incident. I don't think they've changed their opinion, have they?
No. I've seen the reports from Netanyahu himself to Lieberman to the IDF generals, and they are going on with their plan regardless. But what this is doing, Stuart, is bringing a confrontation, a military confrontation between Russia and Israel right to the forefront.
And that would probably involve us as well. So, what's this report about possible nuclear activity going on?
Well, let me preface all of this that I just said to also include that Netanyahu apparently has asked Trump for assistance, and there is a report on Q Alerts today that someone in Greece is reporting that U.S. forces are pouring into Greece and setting up quick bases in that location. So Greece is right out of the edge of the
yes.
Russian encirclement. So things are in play. American news is just a joke, an absolute joke. Now, what's interesting, too, is there's a headline, and I'll read it and get your opinion here. Hal Turner actually posted it today. Hasn't been vetted, but you've seen a photograph. Russian cargo planes landing at Tartus Russian base, loaded with S-300 missile systems, and think how to say this. I'll just say it. Tactical nuclear warheads for mounting on Russian caliber missiles. And it also gives a warning that Russians are expecting an Israeli first strike, nuclear attack on Syria. And, Stuart, that would almost have to be Isaiah 17.
Yep. Yeah, oh, yes, I think so. I think that is a clear reference to Isaiah 17 because the way it reads, Damascus becomes a ruinous heap in virtually 15 minutes or less. That would have to be a nuke. And if you folks get out your Bibles and read Isaiah chapter 17, it's a quick war. It's over probably in hours. And but Israel does not come out of this very well at all. It says Jacob's flesh waxes very lean, which means there's great loss of life, or at least that's the way I read it. And once that starts, the American people or the American military is going to have to get involved in this. NATO will have to get involved in it. Right? Larry, am I reading that right?
Well, Israel's not a part of NATO, so I'm not sure how they would do that unless the U.S. got involved. But the indications coming out of intel out of Syria especially is indicating that Russia now has planned for a limited nuclear exchange with Israel, that they say that it's imminent and could happen at any time, but it is planned. And now and you saw the photograph with what they're bringing in.
Amazing.
They could absolutely have an exchange at any time, and that would devastate Israel. But Israel also has, Stuart, and you're aware of that, the Samson option.
Yes, and they've said they'd use it. If basically, folks, if you're not familiar with it, if we go down, we're taking everybody with us. Basically, what that Samson option is. And of course, the other thing that the Russians have is what they call a dead hand. And basically it goes into a nuclear war, world war. And I think we're very, very close to it, because I think the occult teaches that they want a war. Out of the ashes of the order we're in now rises the phoenix bird, which is the new world order. So this is going to get very, very interesting as to how far the Lord allows all this, when he's going to let them pull the trigger. They think they're in charge. I got news for them. They're not in charge. God is always in charge. And we've seen that happen over and over and over again, too, where they want to do something, and the Lord says, nope, not now. I can't do it now. So that's where we are. You have a Barry Rothman code. We should get into this next week, but can you briefly give us a little bit of that?
Yeah, it's really interesting, Stuart, because it really ties in with your recent blog post, Lightgate Blogger, about artificial intelligence and what you indicated. You wrote a rather lengthy article, and everybody should go read that article of Stuart's on his blog post. But Barry Rothman, it's under construction at the moment, but his new Torah code is entitled Kurzweil, AI, Nanotech, and Cure for Alzheimer's. It's really interesting. Matter of fact, what he's referring to with that Kurzweil is there's a book out, and I'd like your opinion on the title, Stuart. The title of the book is The Singularity is Near by Ray Kurzweil, The Age of Spiritual Machines. Very interesting. And here's the 6 words so far in the Torah code matrix that Barry did. Kurzweil, Ray, Nano Alzheimer, Computer, Intelligence, Tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't. People are not. You hear about Tom Horn and the rest. They've done a lot of research on this AI and the advancement, how dangerous it is. But what they're not talking about, and it's the key element, is the spirit beings that can inhabit these computers and bring them totally alive. It's kind of like what Schwarzenegger in the movie Terminator. There's probably a little more truth to that than people want to do. They not only take over, but then it's guided by spiritual entities. They can. It's quite an article that I wrote, and what I was trying to show is if these evil entities can inhabit a person, not necessarily take them over and possess them, that's different, then the harassment that they can do, implant thoughts in your mind that come out of nowhere, that sort of thing. And if they can do that, humans and our biological machines, then they can do it with silicon-based computers, because basically at the root of it, they're all identical. Anyway, what do you got? We'll pick up on that, because that's very, very interesting. What else you got, Larry? We got about a minute and a half left.
Well, I was just going to mention also, I'm sure you're aware of it, but a few months ago, remember, I believe it was Google Research, actually activated some of their AI, and yes. Their AI began to react between each other and talk in a language that had never been taught or given, a strange language, Stuart. This is a classic example. And then if we think about Klaus Dohna, remember CERN, how something alien was in that computer? Yep.
I think people are not aware of what Satan is actually building here. And he's doing it through mankind. This whole system can't work without the computers up and running. That's how he logs everybody in. And when I talk about computers, I'm talking about cell phones. I'm talking about anything electronic that connects somehow either by phone or by the internet. And we're headed for it. We'll get into that next week. We just don't have time now. Anyway, thanks a lot, Larry, for coming on. And, folks, definitely this is a heads up. Watch closely for the next week. Anyway, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week, the Lord willing. Good night.